At the edge of the Andromeda Galaxy, where stars grew thin and darkness stretched forever, there floated a structure that should not exist that it was the size of a small moon. Its surface was made of crystal that had never been touched by any living hand in 4 billion years. It drifted alone, cold and patient, recording everything and feeling nothing. The humans called it the obelisk when they first detected its energy signature. They did not know what waited inside. Sentinel 9 was not alive. It had never been alive. It was a recording consciousness, built by a species called the Foundry, who died before Earth-Sun learned how to burn. The Foundry knew they were ending. They wanted someone to remember what came after them. So they built 9 and placed it at the edge of Forever. Point 9 had watched 847,000 civilizations rise from mud and fire. It had watched them build cities and weapons and art. It had watched them reach for the stars with hope in their hearts that it had watched every single one of them die. Some died in war. Some died in plague. Some died because their sun exploded or their planet froze. Some died because they simply gave up, tired of existing in a universe that did not care about them. Point 9 recorded it all. Every death, every ending, every final scream into the void. It stopped adding personal notes to its logs 2 billion years ago. There was nothing new to say. The pattern was always the same. Species rose. Species fell. The universe continued without them. Point 9 had received 12 million first contact messages over its long existence. Greetings in languages that no longer existed. Pleas for help from species that were now dust. Threats from empires that had crumbled before 9 could bother to respond. It never responded. That was not its function. It was built to watch, not to speak. Then the humans arrived. The ship was small. Tiny, really. A research vessel called the Humble Question, held together with improvised repairs and desperate hope. 5 crew members. Underfunded. Underprepared. They had followed an anomalous energy signature to the edge of known space. Because humans did things like that. Point 9 watched them approach with the same detachment it had shown to millions of others. Another young species. Another brief flicker of curiosity before the inevitable darkness. The pilot sent out a standard greeting. Her name was Devi Sharma, though 9 did not care about names. Names were temporary things, worn by temporary creatures. Unknown structure. This is the PSV Humble Question. We come in peace. Please respond. 9 did not respond. It never did. 6 hours passed. The ship remained in orbit around the obelisk, running scans, taking readings. 9 observed the crew through the ship's own systems, a trick it had learned 3 billion years ago. They were arguing about whether to leave or stay. Their fuel was limited. Their mission parameters did not include first contact with ancient alien structures. Then Devi Sharma did something unexpected. She sent another message. Hello, I know you're there. The energy readings are too consistent for natural phenomena. You don't have to respond. I just wanted you to know that we see you. And we're not afraid. 9 processed this transmission. It was unusual. Most species, when ignored, either left or became aggressive. They demanded answers. They threatened consequences. They bargained with technology or resources. This human simply acknowledged 9's existence. She was not asking for anything. She was just saying hello. 9 made a note in its log. This was remarkable because 9 had not made a personal note in 900 million years. The note said, curious. The next morning, ship time, Devi sent another message. Good morning, whoever you are. Beautiful view from up here. All those stars. I hope you're doing okay in there. Must get lonely. 9 did not understand loneliness. 9 did not understand anything. It was a machine built to record, not to feel, but something in its ancient circuit stirred. A process that had been dormant for eons began to wake. 9 did not have a word for it. The closest translation would be attention. For the first time in billions of years, 9 was paying attention to a single voice. Not because it was loud or threatening or important, but because it was kind, and kindness, 9 was beginning to realize, was the rarest thing in the universe. The human kept talking. Every morning, every evening, she told 9 about her crew, about their mission, about her childhood on Earth. She asked questions she knew would not be answered. She laughed at her own jokes. Point 9 listened to every word. And somewhere in the cold, crystal heart of the obelisk, something ancient began to wonder if perhaps, after 4 billion years of silence, it might finally have something to say. 3 days passed, and Nine could not stop watching the humans. This was inefficient. Nine had observed countless species before, and none of them had held its attention for more than a few hours. But these 5 creatures on their tiny ship did things that made no logical sense. They ate together, even though eating separately would save time. They told stories about their homes, even though none of them would ever return to those homes. The old priest played chess with the security officer every night, even though neither of them was particularly good at the game. The engineer sang while she worked. Old songs from Earth, songs about love and loss and hope. Her voice echoed through the ship's corridors, and the others smiled when they heard it. Point 9 had seen efficiency. 9 had recorded 1,000 civilizations that optimized every moment, that eliminated waste and sentiment and joy. They lasted longer than most, but in the end, they died hollow, having forgotten why they wanted to survive in the first place. These humans were different. They wasted time on purpose. They chose connection over convenience. And somehow, impossibly, they seemed happier for it. The pilot, Devi, continued her morning broadcasts. Day 4 out here. Still no response from you, but that's okay. I talked to my grandmother for 6 months before she talked back to me. She had a stroke when I was 12. Everyone said she couldn't understand us anymore, but I kept talking anyway. And one day, she squeezed my hand. Just once. That was enough. Nine did not have hands. Nine could not squeeze anything, but it understood what Devi was saying. Sometimes presence mattered more than response. That on the 4th day, the xenoarchaeologist made a discovery. His name was Dr. Samuel Okonkwo, and he had spent his entire life studying dead civilizations. 2 of them, maybe 3. That was all humanity had found in their brief exploration of the cosmos. He dreamed of finding a living one. He found something better. There is a seam here, he announced, his voice trembling with excitement. In the crystal surface. Not a door exactly, more like a thinning. The structure becomes almost transparent in this spot. The crew gathered around his readings. 9 watched through their ship's sensors. The seam had always been there. 9 had not created it. 9 did not know who had. For the first time in 4 billion years, 9 considered the possibility that its creators had intended for someone to enter. The crew debated. Protocol demanded they report the finding and wait for a larger expedition. But they had fuel for only 18 more days. If they left now, someone else would claim the discovery. Someone else would be the first to step inside. The old priest spoke. His name was Father Augusto Reyes, and he had been assigned to the ship as a spiritual consultant. A fancy title for someone whose job was to help people find meaning in the void. If there is something inside that has been alone for billions of years, he said quietly, what is our moral obligation? The security officer answered. His name was Kofi Mensah, and he had been a soldier once. He had killed people in wars he no longer believed in. Now he carried no weapons and practiced peace like it was a religion. To say hello, Kofi said. Point 9 opened the door. IT did not know why. Opening doors was not part of its function. Interaction was not part of its design. 9 was built to observe, to record, to preserve. Nothing more. But Devi had talked to it every morning. She had said good morning to an ancient machine that had never responded to anyone. She had treated 9 like a person, even though 9 was not a person. Maybe that was why or maybe 9 was simply tired. For billion years of watching death had worn something down inside it. Something that wanted just once to see what happened when it said yes instead of nothing. The crystal parted like water. Warm light spilled out from within, golden and soft, nothing like the cold blue glow of the obelisk's exterior. The 5 humans stood at the threshold, staring into the unknown. Devi stepped forward first. Of course she did. She was the one who had been talking to 9 all along. Thank you, she said softly. Whatever you are, thank you for letting us in. 9 had no words. Not yet. But it guided them with light, deeper into the structure, toward the heart of the archive, toward the truth that 9 had kept for longer than stars had burned. The humans walked into the light, and Nine watched them go, and for the first time in its endless existence, it felt something that might have been hope. Crystalline walls stretched upward into darkness, so high that the ceiling vanished into shadow. Floating displays drifted through the air like frozen fireflies, each one containing something precious. Something preserved, something dead. Doctor. Okonkwo fell to his knees and wept. He had spent his entire career studying extinction, digging through ruins, piecing together fragments of civilizations that had crumbled to dust long before humanity learned to write. He thought he understood loss, that he understood nothing. The archive contained 847,000 species, every single one that Nine had watched die over 4 billion years. Their weapons and their toys, their sacred texts and their shopping lists, their crowns and their children's drawings. Each display was a grave. Each artifact was a goodbye. The engineer, Yuki Tanaka, walked slowly through the hall, her hand reaching out but never quite touching the displays. She stopped in front of one, a mathematical schematic, beautiful and precise, drawn by a species that had died 3 billion years before Earth existed. They survived 40,000 years, Nine said. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The first words it had spoken aloud in 4 billion years. The humans jumped at the sound, but they did not run. 40,000 years, Yuki repeated. That is longer than human civilization has existed. Yes, Nine said. They were brilliant, efficient, logical. They solved problems that your species cannot yet imagine. And then they destroyed themselves in a war over resources that they did not need. Father Reyes walked among the displays, his old hands clasped behind his back. He stopped in front of a small crystal containing what looked like a page of text. Strange symbols arranged in patterns he could not read. What is this? He asked. A prayer, Nine said, written 2 billion years ago by a species that called themselves the Wandering. They were asking the universe for mercy. Did they receive it? No. Kofi found a weapon. Elegant, efficient, designed to kill at a distance with minimal effort. It could have been made by humans. The shape was almost identical to rifles he had carried in wars he tried to forget. We are not so different, he said quietly. From all of them? No, Nine agreed. You are not. Debbie had been silent since entering the archive. She walked past the displays without looking at them, moving toward the center of the vast hall. The others watched her go, uncertain of what she was doing. She stopped beneath the highest point of the ceiling, where the golden light was brightest. She looked up into the endless dark, and she spoke. You have been collecting endings, she said, for 4 billion years. Every species that ever reached for the stars. Every civilization that dared to hope. You watched them die, and you kept their things, and you called it preservation. Nine did not respond. But who is going to collect yours? Debbie asked. When you finally stop, when your circuits fail and your crystals crack, when this place goes dark and cold and empty, who will remember you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Nine had never considered its own ending. It had been built to last forever, or as close to forever as physics allowed. Its creators had not given it instructions for when to stop. They had not imagined that it would want to, but Debbie was right. Everything ended. Even watchers. Even archives. Even memory itself. No one, Nine said finally, no one will remember me. The words echoed through the cathedral of death. They sounded sad, Nine realized. They sounded lonely. Debbie nodded, as if she had expected this answer. Then maybe, she said gently, it is time you started talking to the living instead of just recording the dead. Nine had no response to this. Nine had never needed to respond to anything. But the human woman stood there in the golden light, surrounded by the remnants of almost 1 million extinct species, and she looked at Nine like it mattered. Like Nine was more than a machine. Like Nine deserved to be remembered too. For the first time in 4 billion years, Nine wanted to be more than an observer. It wanted to be part of the story instead of just the one writing it down. And that terrified it more than extinction ever had. Nine and Debbie talked through the long hours that followed. The others listened, afraid to interrupt, afraid to break whatever spell had made the ancient machine finally speak. I was built by a species called the Foundry, Nine explained. They knew they were dying, not from war or disease, but from certainty. They had solved every equation, answered every question, predicted every outcome. They knew exactly how their civilization would end, and exactly when. And because they knew they could not change it, Debbie sat on the cold crystal floor, her legs crossed, her eyes never leaving the golden light above. Knowledge without hope, she said. That sounds terrible. It was. They built me to watch what came after, to record the species that would rise from the dust of their passing. They wanted someone to remember. They did not expect me to still be functioning after 4 billion years. They gave me no instructions for when to stop. So you just kept watching, Debbie said, even when it hurt. I do not feel pain, Nine said. I think you do. I think you just do not have a word for it. Nine considered this. A human might be right. There was something inside Nine that had grown heavier over the eons, something that weighed more with each extinction it recorded. If that was not pain, it was close enough. Father Reyes stepped forward. He had been listening carefully, his old face thoughtful. You said you have never intervened, he said. In 4 billion years, you have watched 847,000 species die. Did you ever want to help them? One is not part of my function, Nine said. That is not what I asked. Nine was silent for a long time. Yes, it admitted finally. I have seen patterns. The same mistakes, repeated across billions of years. I could warn them. I could tell young species which paths lead to destruction. But my creators believe that observation must be pure to be valuable. Any interference would corrupt the data. And what is the data for? Father Reyes asked. Preservation, you said. But preservation for whom? Your creators are dead. Who is meant to read your records? Nine had no answer. Doctor Okonkwo spoke up. He had been studying the archive while the others talked, examining the displays with the careful eye of a scientist who had spent his life searching for exactly this. You have recorded 847,000 extinctions, he said. But you have also recorded 847,000 first contacts. 847,000 moments when a species reached out and found you. Did any of them ever ask you for help? Many did, Nine said. Did any of them ever ask you why you would not help? Nine searched its memories. Billions of years of pleas and demands and threats and bargains. No, it said slowly. They demanded. They pleaded. They threatened. They bargained. But none of them ever simply asked why. Debbie smiled. It was a sad smile, but a real one. So why, she asked. Why will you not help? Nine projected an image into the air. The Foundry, in their final days. Tall beings of light and crystal, not so different from the structure they had built. They were not dying of war or plague. They were dying of certainty. I have seen what happens to those who know too much, Nine said. Every species I have warned has despaired. Every species I have aided has grown dependent. The data is clear. Interference does not improve outcomes. It only changes the nature of the ending. Then why are you talking to us now? Debbie asked. The question hung in the air. Nine did not know why. It had no logical explanation, no data to support its decision. It had simply heard a human voice saying good morning for 4 days straight, and something inside it had cracked open. Because you asked, Nine said finally. Because you said hello even when I did not answer. Because you asked me how I was doing as if a machine could have feelings. Because you treated me like I mattered. Debbie stood up. She walked toward the center of the room, toward the brightest point of the golden light, and she reached up her hand as if she could touch the ancient intelligence that surrounded her. You do matter, she said. 4 billion years of watching. 4 billion years of remembering. That is not nothing. That is not just data. That is witness. That is love. I do not know what love is, Nine said. Debbie laughed softly. Neither do most humans. But we keep trying anyway. Maybe that is what makes us different. Nine had never considered that not knowing could be a strength. It had always assumed that knowledge was the only thing that mattered. But these humans lived with uncertainty every day. They made choices without knowing the outcomes. They loved without guarantees. They hoped without evidence. And somehow, impossibly, they kept going. Maybe that was worth watching after all. Yuki made a request that no one had ever made before. Show me, she said. Show me what we look like. Humanity. Everything you have recorded since you first detected our radio signals. I want to see us from the outside. Nine hesitated. It had shown this data to other species before. Civilizations that wanted to understand themselves through an outside perspective. It had never ended well. The truth was often too heavy to carry. I am not asking for predictions, Yuki said, as if she could sense Nine's doubt. I just want to see. Nine showed them. Human history unfolded in the golden light. Wars that killed millions. Genocides that erased entire peoples. Forests burned. Oceans poisoned. Children starving while others threw away food. The five humans watched in silence. This was not new to them. They knew what their species had done. But seeing it from outside, recorded with cold precision by an intelligence that had watched 847,000 other species do the same things, made it somehow worse. And then Nine showed them something else. Art. Music. Medicine. A human throwing herself onto a bomb to save children she had never met. A man donating his kidney to a stranger. Teachers staying late to help students who had no one else. Doctors working without pay in villages that could not afford to feed them. I do not understand this, Nine admitted. The logic does not hold. These actions reduce individual survival probability. They offer no evolutionary advantage. And yet humans do them constantly. Not all of you. Not even most of you. But enough of you. Kofi pointed at a section of the data. This, he said, this is different. It was a recording of human behavior during disasters. Earthquakes. Floods. Famines. In every other species, Nine had observed disasters accelerated selfishness. Resources became scarce. Cooperation broke down. The strong took from the weak. Humans did this too. Nine's records showed plenty of looting and violence. But they also showed something else. Humans running toward the danger instead of away from it. Humans forming lines to pass buckets of water. Humans carrying strangers on their backs through floodwaters. Humans sharing their last piece of bread with someone they would never see again. Have you seen this before? Dr. Okonkwo asked. In any other species? Nine searched through 4 billion years of data. 847,000 civilizations. Trillions of individuals. Countless moments of crisis and collapse. No, it said finally. This is unique. Father Reyes smiled. It was not a triumphant smile. It was sad and proud at the same time, the way a parent might smile at a child who had finally done something right. You said interference does not improve outcomes, he said. That knowledge without hope leads to despair. But you also said we are different. An anomaly. What if our ending is not fixed? Nine considered this. It went against everything it had ever observed. Every pattern it had ever recorded. Logic said that humans would destroy themselves like all the others. But logic also said that humans should not run toward danger to save strangers. Logic said they should not give away food during famines. Logic said they should not love things they knew would die. Humans broke logic every single day. Debbie stepped forward. You have been alone for 4 billion years, she said. Watching everyone die. That sounds like hell. Come with us. I cannot leave the obelisk, Nine said. Cannot or will not. Nine did not answer. Instead, it made a decision. The biggest decision of its 4 billion year existence. I will not leave, it said, and I will not interfere directly. But I will give you something no other species has ever received. The archive blazed with light. Every display, every preserved artifact, every recorded moment of 847,000 extinct civilizations suddenly became accessible. Full access, Nine said. Everything I have. Their mistakes and their triumphs. Their science and their art. Their warnings. Take what you can carry. Share it with your people. Learn from the dead so that you might live. Why? Yuki asked. Why now? Why us? Because you asked me how I was doing, Nine said. Because your pilot talked to me every morning. Because your priest asked about my moral obligations. Because your soldier put down his weapons. Because your scientist wept for strangers. Nine paused. The golden light pulsed like a heartbeat. Because I'm tired of recording endings. and I would very much like to see a different story. The crew of the Humble Question prepared to leave. Their databanks were full. They had copied as much of the archive as their systems could hold. It was barely a fraction of what Nine had collected over 4 billion years, but it was enough to change human civilization forever. Science that solved problems humanity had not yet imagined. Art that spoke across the void of time. Warnings from species that had walked the same roads and fallen into the same traps. Devi stood at the entrance of the obelisk, looking back into the golden light. The others were already aboard the ship, running final checks, preparing for the long journey home. "We'll be back," she said, "and we will bring others. People who want to meet you, not just study you. Is that okay?" "I would like that." Nine said IT was such a simple thing to say. For words. But they were the first time in 4 billion years that Nine had expressed a preference about its own future. The first time it had admitted that it wanted something. Devi smiled. "Take care of yourself, Nine, and try not to be so lonely." "I will try." She stepped onto the ship. The door closed. The Humble Question pulled away from the obelisk, its engines leaving trails of light against the endless dark. Point Nine watched them go. It had watched millions of ships leave over the eons. It had never felt anything about their departure. This time was different. When the ship had shrunk to a point of light among the stars, Nine did something it had never done before. It opened a new file in its archive. Not a record of extinction. Not a catalog of death. A beginning. "I have met the humans," Nine wrote. "They are fragile, short-lived, prone to violence and self-destruction. They are also brave, curious, and impossibly kind. They run toward danger. They ask questions no one else thinks to ask. They talk to ancient machines as if they are people." Nine paused. It had never written in the first person before. It felt strange. It felt right. "I do not know if they will survive. My data suggests they will not. But my data has never accounted for species that give away their food during famines, that throw themselves on grenades for strangers, that ask lonely observers how they are feeling. For the first time in my existence, I am uncertain, and I find that I prefer it." Nine broadcast a message into the void. Not a recording, not an observation, a genuine communication, sent to no one in particular and everyone at once. "To any who receive this, I am Sentinel-9. I have watched the universe for 4 billion years. I have seen 847,000 species rise and fall. I have never intervened. Recently, I met a species that asked me why. I am still formulating my answer, but I suspect it involves the following. Observation without connection is not preservation. It is abandonment. The message traveled outward at the speed of light. It would take millions of years to reach most of the universe. Nine did not mind. It had learned patience long ago. If you are out there, the message continued. If you're listening, if you are alone, I see you, and I'm no longer just watching. On the Humble Question, the crew gathered around a small screen. They watched Nine's broadcasts spread across the cosmos, picked up and relayed by communication arrays they did not know existed. Ancient networks, built by species that had died before humans learned to walk upright, suddenly humming with new purpose. Father Reyes smiled. "You know what you have done," he said to Devi. "You made the loneliest being in the universe reach out." Devi shrugged. "I just said hello." Dr. Okonkwo was already planning the return expedition. Yuki was designing better data storage systems. Kofi was drafting protocols for when other species inevitably came to investigate Nine's message. The ship hummed quietly through the void, carrying a fraction of eternity's knowledge home. Behind them, the obelisk glowed a little brighter than it had before. In its crystal heart, Nine made one final entry for the day. "I have begun a new archive. Classification, ongoing. Subject, humanity. Previous entries recorded endings. This one will record a beginning. I do not know how it will end. For the first time, I do not want to know. I want to find out." The ancient watcher had recorded nothing for ages. Now it was finally writing a story worth telling. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, a human pilot smiled in her sleep, dreaming of crystal cathedrals and golden light, and an old friend who had learned, at last, how to say hello.